Hello everyone, welcome to the Concern Podcast where we unpack political, social, economic and cultural stories shaping our world. I'm Emmanuel Taban, and on this section of our podcast, I want us to look at this scenario here where I feel that the current vice president of South Sudan, who is among the four vice presidents who heads the economic cluster, Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel, why I think he is now the acting first vice president of South Sudan. This is what I've observed, and I feel that uh, Dr. Mel is now the acting first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan, replacing Dr. Riek Machar. And these are the reasons that I'm going to tell you. I'm going to explain to you why I feel he is now the acting first vice president, replacing Dr. Machar. And just before we go into the details of this video, please, if this is your first time, you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do it. Subscribe, and so you can get notified for our next videos that are coming. And please also, if you find that this video is going to be interesting at the end of it, please leave a comment and what you think about this perspective that we're talking about on this video. Thank you so much. And back to our video. I feel that Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel is either secretly the acting first vice president, or there is something that is happening behind doors that people are not noticing. You know, early this year in March, when the incident happened in Nasser County in Upper Nile, and between the South Sudan People's Defense Forces and then the youth militia that they called the youth militia, the White Army, where they were engaged in some kind of conflict between the youth militia group and then the South Sudan People's Defense Forces with the help of the UPDF, of course, the Ugandan People Defense Forces. You know, in March, there were allegations that Dr. Riek Machar was linked to the incident that happened in Nasir, that he was behind mobilizing all the youth groups and the people in Nasir to actually fight against the government forces, the South Sudan People Defense Forces in Nasir. And as a result, I think late March, on 28 or so, about 28th of March this year, forces were sent to Machar residence. I think the minister of was that like director of interior, and some fully parked vehicles with armed forces were taken to Machar's residence. They disarmed all Machar bodyguards, and Machar was put under house arrest. They actually handed to him an arrest warrant, and Machar later was arrested, put under house arrest. And the reasons that they actually put out for the arrest was that Machar was linked to the Nasser incident that happened in March, that he was behind coordinating the fight that happened in Nasser in March. And for that reason, he was made to be a suspect. And there was an investigation team, I think, that was formed to investigate the claims of Machar links to the Nasser incident, if at all he was behind that incident that happened in March. But now, that is not mainly the part of our discussion. So, of course, from that time, the country has been going on without the first vice president. We only have the four other vice presidents, the one that leads the service cluster, the infrastructure cluster, and then the economic cluster. And the first vice president has not been in place, so that position has been vacuum is not filled. So the reason why I think Dr. Mel is now the acting first vice president is because of this. Last week, I think late last week, that was on Friday, the first son, or the son to the president of Uganda, that is none other than General Muhoozi, had a visit to Juba. He came to Juba, and when he was in Juba, Of course, it is claimed that the major issues that they discuss with President Kiir in Juba and then the chief of the defense forces in South Sudan, and the issue that they discussed was mainly the border conflict that happened in Kajukeji between the South Sudan People's Defense Forces and the UPDF soldiers, where people were killed and displacing about 15,000 people, and that was the case that people claimed that Muhoozi came to South Sudan to talk about. When Muhoozi came, he was welcomed, of course, by his counterparts, and then he was led to the State House in J1. They had conversation with President Kiir, and also after conversation with Kiir, Muhoozi met Dr. Bol Mel. They had also discussions with Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel. And it is said the issues they discussed on that meeting was security-related issues. Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel, who is the first vice president, heading the cluster of the economic cluster, discussing security issues with Muhoozi, who is the chief of defense forces, leading all the forces in Uganda, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army under Museveni. And when Muhoozi came to Juba, he had like some talks. After meeting Kiir, he had talks with Bol Mel, discussing issues to do with security. Now, here's the reason. But even before with that, before we get into that, I want us to ask, does that responsibility of discussing issues to do with security fall under Bol Mel's docket of economic cluster? It doesn't at all. Now, I'll take you back. In 2018, South Sudan signed the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in the Republic of South Sudan in Addis Ababa. And the functions that were represented in that agreement, of course, were many. The SPLM in government, the SPLM-IO, the former detainees, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, and other parties, they are all brought into the agreement. They are the signatories to that peace agreement. Chapter 1 of the agreement, Article 1, specifically states or set out the structure of the transitional government in South Sudan. It set out the structure and the responsibilities of all those that form the structure and the positions that forms the structure, starting from the president, the first vice president, and all the other 4 vice presidents. Chapter 1 puts out clearly the responsibilities of all those people. Now, of course, we know that later Dr. Mel replaced Iga, who was then the first vice president heading the economic cluster. But then, of course, in all the clusters, we have the governance cluster. The governance cluster in Article 1 or in Chapter 1 of the agreement is to be headed and chaired by the first vice president, which was Dr. Machar. Exclusively, Chapter 1 states that the responsibility of the first vice president is, 1, he is to be the deputy of the National Defense Forces, the deputy chair of the National Security Council, the deputy chair of the National Defense Council, and he is to chair and oversee the governance cluster. Now, the governance cluster is a very broad cluster that has 12 ministries. There are 12 ministries that falls under the docket of the governance cluster, which is supposed to be headed and overseen by Dr. Machar. So these ministries include 1, the Ministry of Presidential Affairs, the Ministry of Cabinet Affairs, the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Peace Building, the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, the Ministry of East African Affairs. You know, these are some of the few ministries, the Ministry of Communication, Technology and Postal Services, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, these ministries all fall under the governance cluster. The Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs, the Ministry of National Security, these all fall under the governance cluster, which is supposed to be overseen and chaired or headed by the first vice president. Now, when Muhoozi came to Juba, he had issues, he had discussions with Dr. Mel. And the issues that they're discussing were related to security, related to defense. Now, in your understanding, does that fall under Dr. Mel's responsibility? Mel is supposed to look at some ministries that falls under his docket. When we're talking about the Ministry of Petroleum, we're talking about Ministry of Road and Bridges, we're talking about the Ministry of Tourism, we're talking about Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. These are the ministries that falls under the responsibility of Dr. Bol Mel. But how did Mel, or why did he discuss issues to do with security with Muhoozi? Yet he is not heading, or he's not the one overseeing the governance cluster. So for these reasons, I feel that Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel is either the acting first vice president right now. He is made the acting first vice president in the Republic of South Sudan, replacing Machar at the moment, you know, because issues to do with defense, security, they solely fall under the docket or the cluster of governance. Not at all supposed to be that Bol Mel should be worried about or bothered about. But why did he get? Where did he get that? That chance to go and discuss issues to do with security with Muhoozi. Now, one thing came in my mind again, that if Bol Mel was not discussing issues to do with security, or if he's not the acting first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan, then there was something that they two were discussing, and it is things to do with money. There's other thing that I feel they were doing, because remember, there are claims that the current Ugandan troops that are deployed in Juba, in Bilnyang village, that are tasked with the responsibility of guiding Juba, we had this claim that each soldier who is deployed in Juba is paid $200 per day. And there are also claims that most of these soldiers, they were not paid for a very long time. And therefore, Muhoozi's coming to Juba was mainly to discuss issues to do with the money that was supposed to be given to these Ugandan troops, of which I will understand completely. I'll totally understand that if it is things to do with money, because that totally falls under the docket of Bol Mel, being the vice president in charge of the economic cluster. But if it's things to do with security, if indeed what they discuss is things to do with security, then Bol Mel is the acting first vice president. And yes, the allegations regarding the Ugandan troops being paid $200 per day, it's actually an allegation that came from a very, very close person who was a private secretary to President Kiir, and he is a member of the Awan Chan youth group, which is from Kiir's hometown of Warab. So this person disclosed that each Ugandan soldiers who is stationed in Juba is actually paid per day $200. You know, and you could imagine the amount of money that is being paid to these people, because they came in around March 9 to 11 of this year. So you can imagine how much money is being paid to these people. And they're not just like 100 forces or 200 troops. They could be more than that, 500 or even 1,000. And each of them is getting $200 per day. And they're still in the country. So you could imagine how much money is going out just to paying these troops. If I thought that allegation is true, you know, I'm not saying the allegation is true, But even the person who said that is now in prison. The private secretary to Kiir, the former private secretary, and he was also a special envoy for President Kiir on Pibor administrative area. He was the person, the lead negotiator who brought in the agreement or the peace deal that was between the Cobra function and then the South Sudan government. So he is in prison right now because he has disclosed that information that each Ugandan soldier stationed in Bilyang village is being paid $200 per day. So yes, and for that reason, I feel Dr. Mel is either the acting first president right now in the Republic of South Sudan. And if at all what they discussed with Muhoozi were concerning security, and yes, he is the acting first vice president. But if it is different, if what they discussed was really concerning his docket, then it is regarding the money that people are saying were not paid to the Ugandan troops. Yes. So that is certainly about this video. And please, if you find this video interesting again, I urge you to subscribe and get notified for our next videos that comes. And please, thanks for always supporting us. Thanks for subscribing to our channel if you have done. And see you in our next video. I remain Emmanuel Taban, and this is the Concerned Podcast, where we bring you stories that shapes our community and stories that shapes our world.